Hello and welcome to the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players. I'm your host, David Holloway, and I'm thrilled as always to be here with you. And he's back. He's back with a vengeance. It's Mr. Paul Bindig. How are you, sir?
Wow, it's amazing. I finally get to be back talking to you, David. I've missed you so much. I've missed our viewers. I've missed our listeners. What can I say? It's been absence has definitely made my heart grow fonder.
Yeah, because it's been, I think it was episode 58 you last joined us, so and this is number 90, so no, it's great to have you back, and it's a great guest that you've come back for. We're really pleased to introduce Mr. Rob Aries. As you'll hear in our interview with Rob, he's had an amazing career in jazz production and is currently the keyboard player with that amazing Scottish funk and R&B outfit Average White Band. Which, as we discuss in the actual interview, is the 15th most sampled band in history. Which, when you listen to their music, you can understand why. It's just amazing. So we talked to Rob about a whole range of issues, from the music, and his thoughts on the industry and where it's going. So yeah, we'll jump into the interview with Rob, and we'll talk to you after the show. Rob, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. How are you, sir?
I'm fine. It's fun to be here.
Yeah.
I've looked at the list of the other guests you've had. I'm honored to be in that company. Really.
Yeah, you're well deserved in that company, and no, it's great to have you on board. So I thought I'd start off with a bit of a funny question, Rob, is how we're going to talk about your wider career, and you're obviously a jazz guy, a huge love of jazz, and have played with some amazing artists in that genre amongst everything else. How does a jazz guy from the east coast of the US end up in a Scottish funk band?
That is an interesting question. When I was in high school, I think a sophomore in high school, I really got into jazz. I was into rock, like I like, Cream and Grand Funk Railroad, that kind of stuff. Then I just got into jazz, and I became kind of a jazz snob. And then not too long after that, though, I really started getting into funk, that kind of stuff. And I was, I'd have my cassette tapes of James Brown and the Meters and stuff. Some of the Average White Band guys lived near me, like most of them moved to the States, and the leader, Alan Gorey, he lived in a town not that far from me, and there were people we knew in common, and I eventually did get to meet him, and I actually wrote a song with him like many years ago, and I kind of lost touch with what they were doing, but the Average White Band, they got back together, obviously not with the original personnel, just a few of the original guys. And they've been touring pretty consistently since, I would say, like 1992, something like that. Of course, from then, it was mostly like under the radar kind of, because their big time, I guess, had kind of come and gone by then. But they were working steadily, and opportunity came up about 10 years ago. They wanted to make a change with the keyboard player that they had, and Alan remembered me, and I had also played on one track of one of their CDs about 8 or 9 years before that. So, we kind of knew each other, and I got the call, and that was it. That's pretty much how it happened.
Yeah, and so what was that like for you as a very different experience, I'm assuming, to what you'd done prior? Was there a learning curve there for you, Rob, or it was just a bit of adjustment?
Well, to be honest, it felt like one of the gigs that really fit me the most. I mean, I had been listening to their stuff since I was a kid, and one of my hobbies was playing bass, and I'm totally self-taught. I owned a bass, and I'd put on their Feel No Fret album and play along on bass with it. And of course, the gig that I'm doing, I have to double on bass on a couple of tunes. So that kind of served me well. But yeah, that's pretty much how it works. I just thought it was like the best gig. I had dreamed of being in a band like the Average White Band. That was sort of like a goal of mine, to be in a really slamming funk band. And so it was almost like I couldn't believe it when I got the phone call. So yeah, it was great. I mean, I played a lot of jazz, of course, before that, but I've done what a lot of musicians, especially I think in the New York City area, do. I mean, when you're a freelance guy or gal here, you're just doing. I mean, I was doing weddings. I mean, we may, as we work our way back, we may touch on some of that stuff. I was part of some really great wedding bands, and that kept me busy for a long time. So I played top 40. I played the Macarena. I played the chicken dance. I've done all that stuff, and I played some shows like Broadway type stuff. So it's all part of the mix, But the average white band music is probably some of my favorite music, along along with jazz. It's really and it felt like a really good fit. And there were no charts. I sketched myself a few charts, and pretty quickly learned the songs. And it's a load of fun. And I also get to kind of exercise the nerd side of myself with the tech things. Because I have to handle some loops, and I'm trying to do it on my little 10-pound 5-octave plastic keyboard. So it's been fun getting that rig all set up and going. And it's just great. And we do some really great gigs in great places. I really can't say enough about how much I've enjoyed this gig. Yeah.
We'll explore your rigs and all the rest of it a little bit later, Rob, because we'll be fascinated to hear how you have these things set up. But I'm interested around Average White Band. They're apparently the 15th most sampled band in history, and this obviously relates to the fact that they've got some classic funky grooves. They're very
Right.
cool to listen to, and it's interesting, Rob, talking to a few of my friends here in Australia. Most people here haven't heard of Average White Band, and I'd be talking to a friend and they'd say, "I've never heard these guys," and I'd say, "Yes, you have. You just don't realise that you have." What would you recommend would be a track that people could listen to who maybe aren't that familiar with Average White Band to get them into the sort of music that it is?
Sure. Well, I mean, I found the same thing over here. I mean, if you're under 50 or 55 years old, there's a chance you've never heard of the Average White Band. But as soon as I play them, Pick Up the Pieces, of course, that's the major big hit that they had that really got them on the map. So that tune is pretty familiar to most people because it's been used in movies, it's been used in commercials. I think it was Chris Rock did like a stand-up special, and that was the theme he walked out to.
Uh-huh.
It's been pretty much played throughout the years in one context or another. Now, they have other tunes like Schoolboy Crush. Um, a lot of those grooves have been sampled and used by rappers. But, when they sample, they'll take like 2 or 4 bars, and then they'll process it. They'll put it through filters, they'll slow it down, change the pitch and stuff. So it's not as identifiable. But I think if you were to Pick Up the Pieces, that would be probably your best shot at getting somebody to say, "Oh yeah, I know that. I've heard that."
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, totally agree. And so for all our listeners and viewers, absolutely do that. Go and listen to Pick Up the Pieces, and you will have that moment. You go, "Oh yes, yeah, I know this track. It's fantastic." Let's take it right back to the beginning. So tell us about your formative years. What first inspired your excitement with music? What was it like growing up in your house? How did you get into deciding music could be a thing for you?
Well, you know, my my mother would say that it was all in her genes, that, she actually was a music major. And I think at a, I forget the name of the college, she graduated with a degree in music. She took a job in a bar. She wasn't a jazz player at all, but she did a gig for 1 week and decided the music life wasn't for her. So she went to school for music, did a 1 week gig, and then said, forget it. But I started lessons pretty early. I started classical lessons. I was probably around 5 or 6 years old, and I took classical lessons until I was about maybe 12 or 13. And it's one of my biggest regrets is that, I got into, like I said, Grand Funk Railroad and, Cream. And I didn't want to bother with classical music. Part of it was the teacher that I had. I mean, I don't want to put the blame off on someone other than me. It's really my fault. But she would just hand me a piece and say, okay, now we're going to do this, and I'd work on that, and then okay, now we're going to work on this. I think looking back on it now, like if I were to teach, I don't do any teaching at the moment, but my idea would be to foster, to like get a little bit behind the music itself and get into the story of, where it comes from and the history, and try to foster some interest like that. And I mean, I knew nothing about like the different eras of classical music, and it was just strictly, this is Bach, you're going to play this now, and then on to the next piece. But I did take classical lessons until I was about 12 or 13. And then I started taking jazz lessons with a guy named John Mehegan, who's, I'm not sure if he was the first, but he's one of the first to really become known as a jazz educator. I believe he taught at Juilliard for a little while. I think Chick Corea was in his class for 1 semester and then quit school, which was a good thing for him to do. But John was really, I think, the guy that really helped shape me in terms of he would be that guy that would go a little bit behind the music and impart some of what it was really about, like some stories. He had a lot of stories. He was very experienced. He played with a lot of guys. I believe he made a record with Max Roach and Charlie Mingus, I think, and he did a bunch of recordings, mostly in the 40s and 50s. He was kind of a swing era guy, but he had an amazing ear. I believe one of his books, there's a transcription of Art Tatum's Aunt Hagar's Blues, which is just insane. So he was a great guy, and he lived in the town right next to me. So it was my mom used to drive me to his house. This is in Westport, Connecticut, and I was probably 15 and 16 at that point. So I studied with him for a few years, and then I went off to college thinking I was going to get into film and TV stuff because that was one of, I guess that was one of my interests also. I did that for a year, and then I realized I just wanted to do music. And that's what it's been ever since, just playing music and just kind of going from gig to gig, and having some good years, bad years, and everything in between. But that's been pretty much my story from there.
Yeah. And so it sounds like for you, Rob, that John, as the new teacher or mentor, so to speak, is what got you into jazz. And I mean, what do you recall what it was like for you really discovering just how broad jazz can be and what impact it had on you realizing that there were some other options aside from, as you said, the classical, more didactic route?
Sure. Well, I actually know exactly how I wanted to why I wanted to play jazz. It's because of one song on one album. It's kind of a funny story when I look back on it now, but I think I was a sophomore in high school. I think it was probably around 1972, and I had the second Blood, Sweat, and Tears album. And there was a song on, they did an arrangement of God Bless the Child. And inside that arrangement, they go into a double time swing. And something about that just completely captivated me. And it was from listening to that song, I decided I have to do this. This is what I want to do. And that led me to that my path, going to study with John. And I also kind of on my own, I started reading books on jazz and trying to get the history and listening to old records. And I'm actually I'm actually kind of impressed with myself that I that I did all that. But I really wanted to figure it out and know where I was coming from. And of course, I can't really play any of that like stride piano or anything, but I at one point I listened to a lot of it, and at another point I listened to a lot of like avant-garde stuff. That was a little bit later on. I got into like Cecil Taylor. I listened to a lot, and the Chick Corea when he went through that period with that band called Circle. I used to listen to that all the time and try to play in that style, try to figure out what they were doing. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was that one Blood, Sweat, and Tears tune that just got me going, and that's why I went with. That's how I started playing jazz, I guess.
So, Rob, how did you move from doing going to college, obviously doing the study you do, to actually doing regular jazz playing live?
Well, I while I went to a college in Boston for 1 year for video and film, and then I took a year off, and a friend of mine, um, actually one of like the most well-known and best jazz drummers around, a guy named Adam Nussbaum. He asked me to help him. He wanted to audition to get into the music program at the City College of New York, which is part of the State University of New York's system. So I went in there and played with him for his audition, and the teacher there wound up saying to me, "Hey, have what are you doing? Are you going to school? What's your story? How would you like to be in the band here?" So I was kind of floating around. I had taken, I think, a year off after my first year of college, and I think my dad had just passed away the previous year, and we have this social security system here. There was like some money, like if I wanted to go to school, it would be mostly paid for. So um, with my mom's encouragement, because she would rather see her son in college, even if it's going for music, than out of college. I wound up going to the City College of New York and just basically taking music courses there for 3 semesters. So that's like a year and a half. So I never graduated from there. But that was a pretty good learning experience. They had a decent big band. A lot of the students were older. Some were even adults that were going back to school. And it was a pretty good band. I did my first big band arrangement there. And I would say that helped me quite a bit. But at the same time, I was living in New York and I was doing gigs. So I started to do gigs. And I believe, well, I don't know, this might get a little boring. I mean, the engine in my car blew out. I exhausted my bank account fixing. I got a used engine. And then this gig came along. It was my first real road gig. It was playing in the lounges of hotels with this Broadway singer. And it was not a great musical experience. This was right at the height of like disco. So we had like polyester suits, but it was it was an opportunity to make steady money. So I left school and I did that. And after I was done with that, I came back to New York and just kind of joined the crowd of freelance people just scrounging around doing whatever gigs that they could do. I did get to play some nice jazz gigs with people. I think I started doing some wedding gigs around then, just whatever I could do to make money. But yeah, that's how that happened.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier you were in some really good wedding bands that during that period of your life. Are you able to share any particular memories from that or interesting stories from working in the
Sure,
wedding bands?
sure. So I got into a band that it at the time was not a wedding band. It was a band called Nite Sprite. Now this band is mostly known because it's the band that kind of launched uh, Dave Weckl. He was one of the original guys in the band. I was not one of the original guys, but the guy that they had, I think, moved to St. Louis, Missouri, and then they asked me to join. And I was with this band for like I forget exactly how long, but it eventually morphed into a wedding band because one of the fans of the band was getting married and said, "Hey, you want to play my wedding?" And then the leader of the band, he kind of figured out, "Hey, these wedding gigs, they sure pay a lot more than these bar gigs that we've been doing, you know." So it eventually morphed into this band, which had, I mean, I can drop some names on you. Cornelius Bumpus was in the band. He's of course, the sax player that played with Steely Dan, the Doobie Brothers, Boz Scaggs. Well, Dave Weckl had left by then, but it was quite a good band, and we used to play some really hip stuff, and of course, all the wedding stuff too. But I was with those guys for quite a while, and they went through some changes with different singers and stuff. But it was a great band. To this day, I mean, since I've joined Average White Band, I haven't really done many of those kind of gigs. Maybe like two or three in the last 7 years, you know. But listen, if somebody calls me and it sounds like it'll work, if I'm free, sure, why
And I
not? You
and I
know?
feel like wedding gigs, Rob, have become more respectable. They seem to be cyclical, and I think the Wedding Singer movie has a lot to answer for making wedding bands seem like where musicians go to die. But I think they're really useful gigs for a lot of musicians, and wide repertoire, need to adjust things on the fly. Yeah, I think they're great gigs.
Oh yeah, yeah, sure. I mean, well, I find what I've found is really it's up to the leaders. Uh, like Nite Sprite was a great band because the leader of the band, he had been a sideman in a lot of bands, so he had that perspective. I played with some other bands where the leaders had never done anything but lead a wedding band, and it wasn't as loose, and they have certain ideas of how you should look or how you should play, and it got sometimes it got a little bit weird there, and so I think I've been lucky, and I also think that because there's so many really good musicians that live in the New York area, there are a lot of quite good bands, and as long as everyone's on the same page, we all know why we're there. You know, those gigs can be fun, even.
That's
So
right. Yeah, and I feel like you've had an influence on Average White Band in more ways than one, Rob, including your wedding band experience. Because unless I'm mistaken in doing research for this, I've seen Average White Band play Chicken Dance, or am I mistaken?
you might be mistaken. I
Oh,
don't
it must have been research for something else. I've seen a video just in the last 24 hours, so I totally retract that
really.
allegation. Yeah, I know. I retract that allegation. I
I
may have
would
mixed it
love
up
to
with
see
someone
that.
else.
I would love to see that video. The Average White Band playing Chicken Dance. That would
Yeah.
be great.
So now I'm totally paranoid I've got the wrong band. But if for some reason it's true, Rob, this will stay in the edit and I'll send you the
That
link.
would be great. Oh, I'll be on those guys forever.
Yeah, otherwise this will be edited out and I'll throw to Paul for the next
Yeah,
question.
that is funny.
Hey,
Yeah,
speaking of dropping big names, Rob, how do we move from hustling, doing various freelance gigs, doing some wedding gigs, to working with the great jazz guitarist John Scofield in the '80s?
well, that was really great because that I would have to say is probably because of my friend Adam Nussbaum. He recommended me. That was like a fantastic gig. I kind of wish I could go back now and do it over, knowing what I can do now. But I mean, I kind of felt like I was thrown in the deep end with these monsters, and but I do look back on that fondly. That was a great time, um, but a little stressful hanging in with those guys. But I just did the best I could. I go back sometimes and listen to the videos and cringe a little bit at my sounds. I mean, those are the '80s sounds, which some of them don't age very well, but who knows? I mean, at the time, I guess I thought they were okay.
Rob,
But
can you give us some insight into John Scofield as a band leader? What was he like to work with? What was the environment like for you as you said, the guy hanging out with these monsters?
oh, John was great. Yeah, no, because again, I think because he's been a side man, we all know what it's like. I mean, when you go on the road, when you're trying to book a tour, you're trying to get the budget to work. I mean, it's not easy, So his wife actually, I think, helps him with a lot of that stuff. So she, but it's I even see it now. Um, Once in a while, Alan Gorey, the leader of the Average White Band, he'll mention about the economics of trying to keep us working, and it's actually since the pandemic, it's gotten a lot harder. But somehow we made it through. I mean, when I look back at my time with John, I can't believe that I used to carry a Yamaha KX88 in a plywood case. I mean, that weighs 100 pounds. And we used to show up at airports. You'd like you would grease the guy a little bit and they'd put it on the plane. I can't even imagine doing anything like
No.
that. But that's what we used to do. I mean, I used to bring all that gear on the road with me. Yeah, that used to bring a Oberheim. an OBXA in a hard shell case. That wasn't light.
Yeah,
Yeah,
none of that older equipment was light at all, was it? It must have been really
not,
challenging trucking that around.
yeah.
Just to jump tracks a bit, Rob, just something you mentioned. I'm curious. You mentioned the pandemic, and obviously that made it hard for all of us in the entertainment game. I'm curious as to how you coped through that time and what you were able to turn to and what projects you were able to work on during that time.
Well, in 2020, Average White Band worked 2 gigs. So the first gig was in January. That was right before, like, the pandemic really hit us in March, but we had 1 gig in January, and then we managed somehow to do this other gig in August of that year. There was like a lull in the cases, and we like negotiated with this place, like they were going to set up like barricades and plexiglass screens and stuff, and we so that was our second gig. And in 2021, we didn't work at all until August. August of that year is when we
Yeah,
started
wow.
to work again. So we were basically, so that's what, about 18 months of where you're doing like 2 gigs. So I had a few little local gigs, but the thing that really saved me was that we, in the States, they instituted this program. It was like an unemployment. I went on unemployment, but it was a special kind of unemployment for self-employed people, and they worked it out. And I remember having to be on hold on the phone for like 4 hours to get through and to get my application accepted and all that stuff. But that's what really saved me for that time. But yeah, there was barely any work at all. It was said that the people working in the entertainment industry were the first ones to lose their jobs and the last ones to get them back, and which is true. So yeah, that was a very rough time. But now that we're kind of post pandemic, um, you know, hotels are much more expensive than before. Car rentals are much more expensive. Airline flights are more expensive. So that's what I was talking about before when I was mentioning about the economics. It's much harder now to really to tour. So I guess not if you're Taylor Swift maybe, but at the level that we tour, it's just not easy at all. So I don't know what this really portends for the future, but it's not looking great. I think we'll have to see. We'll have to see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, as you're aware, Rob, and most musicians, the need to diversify has never been greater than ever. And I mean, in your case, my understanding is you've done quite a bit of production work as well, Rob. So I mean, I thought it might be worth a bit of a discussion on that. What got you first into the production side of things?
Well, I was always kind of like a an electronics nerd. When I was a kid, I built these amplifiers. There was a company called Heathkit, and they sold kits, and so they had a bunch of like musical instrument amplifiers. I started out building those. Then there was this other kit company. Um, I built some of their amps, and then I got into just recording. Um, I had some very good luck with a song that I produced for this R&B singer. This is around 1984 or so. This was a little before I joined John Scofield. I was playing with Melba Moore in her band, and she had this young singer named Freddie Jackson. And I wound up being able to produce one song. It was actually an old jazz standard. And the album, not because of anything I did, because of the other guys, because of their work, the album wound up going platinum. So I got a little check, not anywhere as near as the size of the check that the other guys got, but I bought myself a Tascam. It's called the Tascam 388. It's 8 tracks on 1/4-inch tape with DBX noise reduction, and it came. It included a board, so you had the board and the tape transport all in one unit. And I set up a little home studio, and I wound up doing some work there. I mean, I produced an album for a guitar player, and I did a lot of recording there, and really learned mostly by making mistakes. I kind of learned a little bit more of how to record, which I think has served me pretty well now that we're beyond the tape era. But it was a good way to kind of get into the game, I think. And I had a whole MIDI rig with a bunch of modules. I had my KX88 there, my Oberheim. I had a DX7. I had an Ensoniq Mirage because I wanted to get into sampling, but at that point it was like the Synclavier or the Fairlight or the Emu. I believe was an Emulator 2. That was still way out of reach. That was around $8,000 to $10,000.
Absolutely.
So I got an Ensoniq Mirage, and later I wound up getting an Akai S900. But I had a whole rack of gear, outboard gear, and it's the kind of stuff that I kind of enjoyed working with. Freddie Jackson was like my main production, I would say. It was just that, and it was a pretty simple song. It was Good Morning Heartache, the old standard Good Morning Heartache, but done in a more, I guess, pop style.
No, that's a great story, Rob, and it's just amazing how the whole sampling thing has really provided an alternative income stream for so many artists, albeit it's getting more difficult now, but great story.
Well, I should maybe mention that Alan Gorey told me that the Average White Band guys made more money from the rap guys sampling their stuff than they did from selling records, their own records, which says something, I think.
It does.
Yeah.
Well, it's a great way to get a passive income as a musician if your stuff is cool enough that someone wants to sample it. So take it and run with it, I reckon.
Yep.
Now, there's a question we ask all our guests, Rob, and
Sure.
with your extensive live playing experience, I'm sure you'll be able to help us out here, and that is, what is a particular musical or technical train wreck that you've had to endure on stage that might be particularly noteworthy?
I've had a few minor, I would call them more minor technical foul-ups, maybe. No real disaster. So I used to carry, like, I have a laptop rig. So I used to carry my laptop, and I used to put my samples on an external drive. And then for one tour with Average White Band, I got the idea, hey, why don't, instead of using like one of these external drives, let me use a USB stick instead. That was the wrong move, because I was in the middle of a song, the stick died. So, I'm kind of dead in the water, but as luck would have had it, it happened to coincide with a drum solo. And I carried a spare disc with me with all my samples, and it's in my backpack, which I bring on stage. So it worked out perfectly. The guy our drummer starts the solo. I had plenty of time. I got the drive. Of course, I had to reboot my software, but he took a pretty long solo. So that was one time. And the only other time something really messed up, I was using this outboard audio interface, and the connection dropped right in the middle of a show. So that was the only time when, for me, the music stopped.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a true catastrophe, really. I mean, the band finished the song, and then it took me like 45 seconds. I rebooted and just plugged into the headphone output of my laptop instead of using the separate, audio interface. And
Yeah.
ever since then, I've left the audio interface at home, and I just use the headphone output now.
There you
It's
go.
been working great.
Yeah,
But
no, great. And Rob, so number one, I think you've given me the first example in music history of a function for a drum solo, so that's good.
yeah,
And B, I've noticed with the recent live gigs I watched of Average White Band playing is that, yeah, you do have the most amazing compact rig. Like, it is amazingly small. Tell us about the rig that you use and how you make that work so well.
sure. So I made my peace with synth actions a long, long time ago, because when you're doing weddings in the New York City area, I mean, it's known for some of the most horrendous load-ins that you could ever imagine. I mean, you can't just park your car in the middle of Manhattan and just leisurely make like 2 or 3 trips up to the function room, which might be on the 45th floor of a hotel. It's just not going to happen. You have to be very mobile. So I started using a 61 key keyboard. Oh, probably in the mid 90s, I would think, when I really started doing a lot of weddings with Nite Sprite. So that was a Roland XP50, and but that had a metal case, and that wasn't really light, but it wasn't, it's not like an 88 key weighted action keyboard. So at that time, I think I was bringing Mackie speakers. So I still don't even know how I did it, but yeah, that's about 100 pounds of speakers. But through the years, I've basically just been cutting down. And when I saw the opportunity to maybe use my laptop, because I already had a laptop, and I think what happened was sometime in the late 90s, Giga Sampler came out for the PC. It was not for the Mac. They didn't actually, I don't think they had streaming sample apps for the Mac for a couple of years. But I was like, wow, I can really maybe get a great acoustic piano sound and bring it with me to a gig. That would be amazing. And eventually, once that came to the Mac, I mean, I already had my laptop because that was my computer. That was my everyday computer. So I got it together, and I started using a very old Native Instruments plugin called Acoustic Piano. And it it sounds. I thought it sounded great, and
It did sound great. I used that one, Rob. It's brilliant. It was a brilliant plug-in. Yeah.
yeah, and it especially live, because it's got a certain quality to it. It's very close mic'd. So when you have your speakers on either side of you and you're listening in stereo, it's just a great, I mean, you really feel a great connection. So I love that piano. In the studio, there's more modern, the art has advanced a little bit. There's some more, there's nicer pianos, I think, like Keyscape and some of those. But I think for doing gigs, still think this New York piano is probably the best that I've ever used. But yeah, so I said, if I'm going to get a laptop and start bringing that to gigs, I'll just get myself one of these tiny little MIDI. controllers and just do it all in the box. And that kind of started my journey. When I first started, I got on eBay, I got one of these Roland modules. It's a JV 1010.
Oh, yeah.
I figured, hey, you never know if something happens to the computer. I want a backup. So the first couple of months, I actually brought it to gigs and I set it up in parallel with the computer just in case, and then after a few weeks, I was like, I'm just going to leave it in the case. And it just kind of went from there. And I think, part of the reason that maybe I've had some really good luck with a laptop rig is that I would bring it to every gig, no matter what it was. It could be a $50 restaurant gig somewhere. I brought my laptop. I figured, let me just use it on every single gig. And doing it like that, I guess I'm going to learn if there's anything, anything that could go wrong with it. So that's what I did. I started doing that probably maybe almost 20 years ago. I mean, I started initially with what Apple called the titanium MacBook. Was it called that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there were titanium ones. Yeah.
The Thai book. It was their very first laptop with a G4 chip. This was around 2001. So I tried it. Things didn't really work. The software wasn't really that good then. So I didn't really wind up starting to bring the laptop full time. I would say till 2005 or 2006. But that's what I've been doing that ever since now. And sometimes I get some looks when people see my little keyboard and stuff, and I can acknowledge that it doesn't have the most impressive stage presence, but I don't know what to say. I'm totally
the playing speaks for itself.
I'm used to it. So I've become very adept at hitting the octave transpose buttons, so I can make my way through all 88 keys worth of notes, even though I don't have 88 keys in front of me.
Yeah, look, it works for you. It's practical. It sounds great. What's not to like about it? And as you say, depending on the gig, it's very helpful to have a small profile. So that's fantastic. So I'm interested in your controller and your laptop. What the next 12 months holds for you? I see Average White Band has got a pretty busy touring schedule up to November, and then I think you're doing a UK tour April, May next year as well. Yes. What else is in store for you, Rob?
Well, that's in terms of the Average White Band. Yeah, I think things are kind of winding down. I think the guys want to maybe end it, next year, probably toward the end of next year. I mean, the UK tour is being billed as let's go around again for the last time. So it's kind of official that this is the last UK tour. But I think once we come back from that, we're going to continue to work in the States for I don't know how long. I've been told, it's been mentioned kind of offhand, that we should be working through the end of the year. And we've all heard about some of these bands that say that they're retiring, and then like a little bit down the line they unretire. I don't really know what the future is going to hold, but it does look like things are winding down. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
no, reasonably so. I mean, what a career that band's had. So yeah, that's totally yeah. No, absolutely. And so, I mean, speaking of looking back over a long period of time, Rob, what would you yourself give as advice to young people looking to start out in the music industry and how they may establish themselves? Obviously, the landscape's incredibly different, but just, any pearls of wisdom you'd want to pass on?
Well, I don't really know that I would be qualified to do that because, like you said, the landscape has changed a lot. I mean, if you put like Ableton in front of me, I wouldn't have the first idea of what to do. I just don't think of making music the way a lot of younger people make music these days. And I don't want to go on a rant, to get off my lawn kind of rant. I kind of could go there a little bit. I find I'm a little disappointed that a lot of today's music, the pop stuff, is basically loopy. It's loopy stuff. It's like 2 or 3 chords that just repeat the entire length of the song. I'm used to songs that, harmonically start at a certain point, move through different points, take you to a couple of different places, and then bring you back. And that's, for me, that's what makes for, what I see as the kind of quality of music that I really enjoy, which is tension and release, and there's really not much of that I hear in this newer stuff, which is just basically a loop on repeat. Of course, there are imaginative ways to do stuff with that. I hear some great sounds. I hear some cool arrangement techniques, but I just wish I heard like more melodic variety and more harmonic variety. I miss that.
Yeah.
So, I would say if somebody wanted to play jazz, though, the advice I would give them would be probably to do what I did. Study, learn from the past, study the masters, starting with like Louis Armstrong, Lester Young, Duke Ellington, and learn as much as you can of the history. Listen to as much as you can. Not that you have to play in certain styles. Like I don't really think unless you're really feeling it. If you feel, if it's really fulfilling that you want to play like stride piano, go for it. But I would say for a musician these days who's looking to get into it as a career to make money, I'm the wrong guy to talk to. I think I really am. But I mean, I would just say good luck. If it's workable that you want to study the latest production techniques, how to make beats and all that, if that gives you a charge and you enjoy it and you like doing it, that's great. I mean, that's probably the best thing you could do. But I mean, for me, if somebody like said, listen, I'll pay you $1 million if you can write me like some hip hop or 2-bar loop stuff, I'd probably have to say, listen, I would love, I wish I could, but it's really not my bag. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Well put. No, well put, Rob. No, I think that's
get
excellent.
off my lawn.
Yeah, get off my lawn, you lot. No, that's a great response, though. I think that's very valid. And Rob, we also ask our guests regularly to tag a keyboard player. So, is there someone you've admired over the years, or even someone newer that you've noticed recently as a keyboard player? You've thought, gee, I'd like to find out more about them.
Well, I'm a little ashamed to say I don't really listen too much to what's going on
No.
these days. I've well, I've heard like, well, I think like, Jacob Collier.
Yeah,
I think he's amazing.
he is.
So that would be one guy for sure. And um, Jonah Nilsson from Dirty Loops. I mean, both of
Yes.
those guys. I mean, as far as stuff that guys are doing now today, those are the bands that I like. I
Yeah.
like, and you know, Snarky Puppy is another one. Because they're they're playing real songs and with really great arrangements, great production, great players. I mean, the Snarky Puppy guys, when I watch those videos, I can't believe nobody's reading. I can't
That's right.
believe they memorized those arrangements. It just blows my mind, you know. But I mean, every one of those guys is an amazing player, and
Absolutely.
you know the collaborations that they've done. I mean, it's just it's such a great marriage of writing, production, and just players' skill. You know, it's just I love seeing that come together like that. You know, it's you know it kind of reminds me like the Pat Metheny group. You know, that's like another example of everything coming together: writing, production, arrangement, and playing. Just perfect mix. You know, that's what I
Yeah,
really.
those guys are an incredible ensemble and,
Yeah.
and so listenable as well. So thank you for the recommendation. And while we're on the subject of recommendations, Rob, I'm going to ask you the question that we love and that stresses out most of our guests, which is to
Okay.
name your 5 albums you could not live without.
I don't know if I can name like specific 5 because there are some albums that you know that I've listened to that I know are like historically significant. Like I should probably say Kind of Blue. You know, I must, but you know, as great a record as that is, the kind of records that give me like goosebumps that I would want to be on a desert island with are probably um, like some of the Miles Davis records from the late 50s, the band
Yep.
with like Philly Joe Jones, and also his band with Herbie and Ron and Tony. I mean, that's when I started getting into jazz and listening to jazz, those were the records that really got me charged up and made me want, you know, and inspired me. So those are the kind of records that I would have. I would say probably the, the real McCoy, uh, which is McCoy Tyner's record with Joe Henderson and Elvin Jones, I believe. Um, that record really hit me hard. I really wanted to play like that for a long time, you know. So that would be one record on my list. And there's a bunch of Coltrane stuff. I was heavily into like the John Coltrane records of the mid '60s. I would say that those. I don't know if I could name a specific one. I mean, of course, A Love Supreme. Um, Although now, you know, you go on YouTube, you can see like Coltrane live at the Antibes Jazz Festival playing A Love Supreme. I mean, that's like another level, I think. I mean, that stuff is just scary. It's just amazing when it really hits you and just makes you feel, you know, that all that stuff, you know, that's what I like. So I would say probably um yeah, there's probably YouTubes that I would like to be with I'd like to have with me, you know. Um that's probably one of the best things about YouTube,
Yeah.
actually, is that the amount of great music that's there. Um,
Yeah, isn't it
recent,
wonderful? Isn't it wonderful?
No.
yeah, I just wanted to mention I've gotten into listening to like Yuja Wang. I'm listening to like a lot of that stuff now, which is just blowing my mind. You know, that's just amazing. So
No, that's very reasonable, Rob. So I mean, we'll put for your desert island is anything by Coltrane and Davis from the 1960s onwards, and that's more than reasonable. Sometimes it's hard to pick.
you know what? And also, I would say probably the Chick Corea record. Now he sings, now he sobs. That's one of my favorites too, because that's again that is a perfect marriage of jazz musicians really doing what they do best, which is play together. You know, like their styles are just kind of made for each other. It's just a perfect combination of writing and playing and the sound of the record is also really good too. So that's another record I'd probably have on my list. Now he sings, now he sobs. And now you got me going. There's a lot of Herbie stuff, of course. I mean, Thrust, stuff like that. I loved, and there's plenty of like the Blue Note records from the mid '60s with Joe Henderson, Lee Morgan, Wayne Shorter, of course. I mean, there's too much to really. There's so much great stuff that I just don't. I don't listen.
No, that's fine. Reasonable.
Every once in a while, but it's hard, It's just hard.
Very reasonable.
It's impossible, isn't it, to have just 5 records? That's why that question stresses all our guests out. They hate it because you can't really boil down all the things you love in music to 5 records, but we make you try anyway. That's what we do.
That's right.
Well, it's sometimes like your favorite record isn't your favorite because you like the playing. It could. There's like different reasons that a record could be that you could like a record.
That's right.
And as you said, Rob, historical context can be quite important as well too, when it comes to the why of music, not just the how. Which, listening to you talk, that's a recurring theme I've picked up from listening and learning from you today. Is you're very interested in the why of music as well as the how, which I think is something we can all learn from a little bit. So thank you for that. That's great. Sure. We're going to wrap up with our quick fire 10 questions. So we're going to ask you 10 real short, snappy questions, get 10 real quick answers, just your gut feel. And we're going to start with, I'll kick off with the first one, which is, what's the first keyboard you ever owned?
It was called the Whitehall Compact Grand Prix Duo, which was, I believe, an Italian, or maybe not. It was it was a Farfisa clone, but it had it was a dual manual organ with a swell bar that you moved with your knee. That was my first keyboard.
I'll be looking at that one. I'll be looking that one up. That's great. Whitehall. Yeah, that's Rob. What's your most important pre-gig ritual? What do you have to do before a gig to feel like you're ready for the gig?
I don't really have a ritual per se, but I say in the past few years, I try to get to a gig really early so that I can just set up, turn my stuff on and know that it works and just relax and I hate being rushed to start playing. And I used to kind of cut things close looking back, in the past. And I really don't know why. It just is not. And if I could give any advice to somebody, looking to be doing gigs, I would say you just want to be relaxed. When you go to start playing, you want to be nice and relaxed. And the best way to do that is to get to a gig early and set up and just make sure everything works. So that's my ritual.
Excellent.
Awesome. Guitars, are they sexy or are they an abomination?
I have to plead guilty. I used one a little bit back in the 80s. I don't know. I don't want to judge. I mean, look at Chick Corea, right? I mean, if he wants to use a guitar, he can use a guitar, right? My attitude toward kind of the show busy aspect of making music has changed. I mean, you are on stage, you're performing, and if you can do something that's going to help, form that relationship with the audience, even though it may not, it may be, to some people a little weird. I'm in favor of it, but I mean, it's not something I'm going to be doing. I won't be strapping on a guitar myself anymore.
That makes 3 of us, I think, Rob.
Yeah.
So, Rob, transpose button or adjust on the fly? I'm imagining you're a adjust on the fly guy, but I could be wrong.
since I've been on the keyboard forum, this has come up a few times, and I have always said that it's a tool, that what's most important is that the music comes off well, So I generally like a lot of the jazz standards I play, I practice them in all different keys. And there's plenty of tunes that if I get on a gig and some strange singer comes up and wants to do a song that I know, but in an unfamiliar key, there's a good chance that, as long as I know the song, I'll be okay with it. But if there is a situation, where you think that you're going to fall on your face and you're doing a gig or you're in front of an audience, and I say use the button if it makes the music happen, and then later on go home and learn the song in that key, But it's a tool. You can use it or you can abuse it, So
Yeah.
I say use it sparingly, use it when you need to. Don't rely on it, but I like that it's there because every so often it comes in handy. So that's my opinion.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you. What's the favorite gig you've ever done?
My favorite gig. Well, there's some gigs I enjoy for different reasons. I would say in the last 10 years with Average White Band, to be playing at, for instance, like, Royal Albert Hall, and it's sold out, almost sold out, and they're all there to see you. Not me personally. They're there to see the band. They're on their feet. They're just, that kind of energy is just something that, that I really enjoy. That it's not what you're really going to see playing, playing jazz at the corner pub, So that's one of my favorite gigs. I would say
Yeah.
probably Albert Hall was a great gig.
Yeah.
We've done some really nice venues, so it's really nice to see like a crowd of people who are there just really to see you.
Yeah.
So that's
Absolutely. No,
that
good
that's I guess that's how I'd answer that.
No, good answer.
Yeah.
And favorite city you've ever played, if that's possible, Rob?
Ooh. Well, that's kind of tough, but I would say, London. Um, London is up there because when I played there with Average White Band, we played at uh, Ronnie Scott's club for like 4 nights in a row. Then we took a couple nights off. Then we played another 4 nights there. So normally, we just do one-nighters. So to be in one place for like almost a week and staying in a nice hotel right near Soho. It's the summertime. That was really probably, and good weather too, which I hear is not all that common. But I'm looking back. That was really that's a treat. I really enjoyed that. But you know, I've been. We also played in Honolulu for a week at the Blue Note, so right on Waikiki Beach. So that was another favorite spot, I would say.
Yeah, that
Um,
sounds terrible. Terrible. Yeah.
yeah, but it's for every one of those. There's also some skanky rock club, in North Carolina or something. So, it's not always like that.
No.
No.
No, of course not. But that would be amazing playing in on Waikiki Beach in Hawaii. So
Yeah,
yeah, thank you so much. Name an artist that you've not worked with, but you would like to work with.
the ones I want to work with are all dead. Yeah.
Your favourite music documentary or movie, doesn't matter how old it is. Rob, is there a particular music-related documentary or movie that you just love?
Well, I mean, the one I have in mind right now, I just actually saw. There's a documentary on John Scofield
Ah,
that I just saw, which is pretty new. It documents a tour that he did, I think, right before the pandemic, and it's very, it's cool because he goes into like a little about the behind the scenes stuff. It touches a little bit on his history, and it's pretty cool. And I've seen some stuff on YouTube. Uh, there's a film I think on on Kenny Kirkland. I don't remember the name of the person that did it, but I think maybe if you put Kenny Kirkland
mm,
documentary, it's kind of an interesting look at someone who should be better known, I think.
yeah.
Yeah, so I guess that's going to have to count for my answer for that one.
Yeah,
Yep,
amazing. Thank you. Thank you.
sure.
Name one thing that you'd like to see invented that would make your life as a keyboard player easier.
Well, it would have to have something to do with moving equipment.
Yes.
So I've got things down pretty light now, but maybe the next step is some kind of I've actually asked for this on the forum. So I just, instead of a laptop, now I'm starting to use an iPad on gigs. I would like to see a keyboard that has a slot that you just drop your iPad into and it connects and everything is done. Your MIDI, your power, audio, it's all just there. Like, just put this thing right down on the keyboard and it just turns on and you're good to go. That
Yeah.
would be that would be great.
No, I
Because
think
right
that would.
now I have this like clip. I have to attach the clip to the stand. Then I have to attach that little camera connection kit guy. Then plug in the cables. You have the USB cable, the power cable, the audio cable. You know, I'm not complaining really because it's much better than the way it used to be. But I think we're really ready for the one-stop shop. Just put the thing in there,
Yeah,
you're good
agreed.
to go. I would love to see that.
And I think I'd like to make an open call to Apple to stick to one connection standard for 10 years so that manufacturers can indeed do that. Because I know there was one keyboard manufacturer early in iPad's existence that did have the ability to slot in an iPad, and then because they changed the connector to Lightning or whatever, and it made it totally redundant keyboard.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah.
I
Thanks, Apple.
I know the one you're talking about, although I don't recall the exact brand.
No,
Um,
same.
it didn't. I don't know that it actually, connected everything,
Everything, no, it didn't.
audio,
No,
MIDI, and yeah. But
no, that's right.
yeah.
And the last quick fire question, Rob, is favourite non-musical activity or hobby? What do you do to keep sane outside of music?
Tinkering with like electronics and fixing things around the house. You know, I like to. I'll go to ifixit.com. I've used that website many times to keep my older laptops alive. Uh, I've taken apart my computers many times, and replaced logic boards or screens and stuff like that. Of course, with the newer Apple stuff, that's really going to be a thing of the past. But
That's right.
that's probably the thing that would occupy my
Yeah.
time if it wasn't music.
No, brilliant.
Yep.
Rob, cannot thank you enough. You've given up a substantial portion of your Friday night to give us an overview of your amazing career. There's obviously still a long way to go. Hopefully, we get you down to Australia at some stage. That would be
You
an
know,
absolute amazing thing.
my my good friend Bill Evans, the sax player, he played a gig at a club. So is there a club called Bird
There,
Lives, or
there
Char-
could be.
Charlie Parker? I'm not sure if it's in Melbourne or Sydney. Anyway, I was kind of wondering why Average White Band, never made it down your
Yeah,
way. But I wonder a lot of things about that band. So
yeah, that's
that
right.
that's just one of them. But yeah, I would love to come to Australia. I've never been to Australia.
No,
So
we'd love to have you, Rob. And again, cannot thank you enough for your time. It's been
sure.
absolutely
Well,
amazing.
Thank you
I
so much.
And there we have it, Paul. Great talking to Rob. Some really interesting perspectives there.
Yeah, it was awesome. Am I repeating myself? Yes, I am. Is it great to meet these guests? It certainly is. What a generous guy, and he's played with some serious people.
Absolutely. And it's an interesting story with I've known Rob online, so he mentioned twice there in the interview about keyboard forums. So that's the musicplayer.com forums we call out to as one of our much valued supporters. Rob has been on there for many, many years, and it was lovely to reach out to him and get him to come on the show because he's quite rightly very well respected on those forums and much more broadly. So, speaking of bands with respect, Paul, tell us about the T-shirt.
Yeah, well, so we've been sent this lovely T-shirt by our friend Tammy from Canada. This is Boneyard. Boneyard are a melodic metal, is probably how I'd describe them. They're a female-fronted band, so really powerful, great female lyrics, vocal harmonies. They've got a female bassist as well, and a couple of token fellas, one on the drums and one on the guitar. They play melodic metal. I guess they're not a million miles away from an Evanescence or something like that, but they're their own band. They've got a really cool sound, a cool vibe. As I said, I love this voodoo style rock chick that they have on their shirt here. And I have to say this: the names of the band members. Now I've written them down because this is just the most fantastic, wonderful thing I've ever heard. So we have the leader of the band and front person, singer, is Pam Terra. So Pamtera. Now that's pretty good, you have to admit. And then we have the guitarist the drummer who is Pam Terra's husband, and that is Jeff Thomas. And then we have the bass player Leslie Osborne. And then we finish that off with the guitarist. His name is Gary. So what a great lineup of musicians they are. But no, check them out. They're really good. They've got a really nice sound, very professional sounding, great vocals, really good guitar playing, very skillful guitar solos. So yeah, if you like your melodic metal, you'll love these guys. Boneyard out of Edmonton in Canada.
No, that's excellent. And again, we love promoting bands and artists. You don't have to be a band; you can be a solo artist. I'm a major ambient tragic, and I know I'll be featuring someone next episode. Just yell out to us if you'd like a bit of a feature.
Yeah, if you want us to promote your musical project, whatever it is, get in touch with us via the contact details David's going to share at the end of the episode, like he does every time. Flick us a T-shirt. We'll wear it. We'll send us a bio. We'll talk about your band. And look, these guys don't even have a keyboard player. Doesn't matter.
Oh, I didn't realise that. No, it's fine.
I'm going to be auditioning soon.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
Yeah,
There's some breaking news. So you're going to have another band in Canada. That makes sense.
Yeah,
So,
well, I'm not busy enough, right? So I'm sure my wife will be happy with me jetting off to Canada for rehearsals every fortnight.
why not? And good on Boneyard for having the funds to fly you over. So that just shows you how successful
they're very
they are.
wealthy.
Yeah, good. All right, so we better go. A big thank you, firstly, though, to our gold and silver supporters. So Paul's already mentioned the wonderful Tammy Catcher from Tammy's Musical Stew. Thank you for your ongoing support, Tammy. The musicplayer.com forums we've also just mentioned. do check them out. And I do need to make a special mention. If you're in the market for gear, particularly hardware if you're in the continental US, but if you're international software, they've actually started up a Music Player Network store. And I've just purchased one of Cherry Audio's synths, the Dream Synth. I already own the GX80 from the Music Player Network store, and it was excellent. It's either same price and in some cases of hardware cheaper than where you may find elsewhere. So, and you're helping to keep that community-driven forum running. So just musicplayernetwork.com, you'll find it. So highly recommended. Also, big shout out to Midnight Mastering. Mike at Midnight Mastering is a key supporter. If you're creating your own music and you want a great person to do mixing and mastering, Mike is your guy. And that is pretty much... Oh, and Brother Paul Brown. Sorry, definitely don't want to forget Brother Paul from the Water Boys. I've said it many times. I love following him on Facebook. Some of the pictures he posts of him in action, usually other people taking photos of him in action, including him topless in the gym. And I've now discovered the secret of why he is the dynamo. I knew he was fit, and it's because he's also a gym junkie, and that's the secret to, well, one of the many secrets to his success. So thank you, Brother Paul. Otherwise, I think that'll do us for this episode. Paul, thanks heaps for coming by, and we'll see you probably for episode 128.
Yeah, look, I'll try and swing by when I can squeeze you into my busy schedule. No, it's, as always, it's been a pleasure, David, and thanks again for inviting me to spend some time with our wonderful guest, Rob.
No problems, and do keep in touch. Our email's editor@keyboardchronicles.com. We're on all the big platforms. Just search for the Keyboard Chronicles at Facebook and Twitter and Threads and TikTok. And I've probably missed one. And then and most importantly, we are on Patreon. So at patreon.com/Keyboard Chronicles. And what we're now in the process of doing is not just giving our patrons early, twice yearly early access to extra content. We're also now tending to post up components of episodes as we edit them over the weeks prior to their release. So you get to see a little bit behind the curtain and some really interesting parts of interviews before the general audience.
We're doing that for our patrons.
Yeah, I know. They deserve it. So they well and truly deserve it.
This is a place you really want to be a patron of, isn't it? It really is. That's incredible, David.
You're a natural salesman. And so, yeah, thanks everyone for listening, and we'll be back for episode 91 very, very soon.